Bill Groom is the production designer on When We Rise. You were tasked with recreating about 4 decades worth of period designs. Talk a little bit about when you first got the scripts for this. What were your initial, how did you start with recreating these period sets?
Well, I'm probably maybe the only person on the project that actually lived through all of those decades. So it was, you know, it sort of took me back to 1972 and all that was going on then. You know, I did Milk with the same group of people: Bruce Cohen, the producer; Gus Van Sant, director; Lance Black, who was the creator for When We Rise. And we kind of covered some of the same ground on Milk. It was interesting to go back into this and carry it all the way to present day. It was quite an undertaking, and I think I read through the script once, loved it, but then when we started doing the detail work, it was pretty overwhelming, actually, of the amount of ground we had to cover in these episodes.
Well, like you said, you worked on Milk, and I was going to ask, since they cover similar territory, were there aesthetic differences between the two at all?
Well, it covered different parts of the story. I mean, there were similarities in the material we were covering, but these were different people in some cases than we saw in Milk. So while it was all set in San Francisco, there were different parts of San Francisco. There were different stories for these various characters. So there was some of the same ground, and then there was a lot of new material that we covered in When We Rise.
When I talked to Carol Ramsey, the costume designer of this show, she said that the general feeling or thought that you guys were going for was realism. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, in that way, that was very similar, I think, to Milk. In both cases, we wanted to be as truthful in telling the story as possible, and in no way sort of create a world that was easily dismissed by the audience. It wasn't fiction, it actually happened, and we tried to be true to that. And I remember when we were doing Milk, and there were some similarities in this as well, we had thousands of photographs from the period, and we went back to the same resources on When We Rise and worked a lot from the documents from that period, from the photographs that had been taken. And there were some photographers that covered that period of time in the early 70s. We relied heavily on all of that, and it was helpful.
And in terms of color and texture and things like that, how do you achieve that kind of realism in your designs?
It's just paying attention, I think, to the details that you're seeing in the research and in talking to people. You know, it was interesting because this moved from the early 70s all the way into 2015, and that was something that I had to be conscious of, is to be aware of how colors and styles changed through those periods to get a sense of movement through time. And I hope we were successful at that. I think we were.
Also, in terms of you know, you follow these this group of characters, these real life people, and you see how they develop over the course of the 4 episodes. Can you talk a little bit about how your designs for, say, their houses or their office areas helped inform their characters?
Well, we actually were able to speak to these people, and like Rona and Cleve Jones, and so we got a lot of information from them about where they were living, how they were living, Rona actually had some pictures of her house in the early days. And we just, I think we're very lucky to be able to work with the actual people that we see in the movie and learn about their walk through this period of time.
And it's a very ambitious undertaking. I mean, you've got not just recreating the period, but you have several different sets that you have to create, office buildings, hospitals, courthouses, homes. Working on a TV budget and a TV schedule, what are some of the challenges of that?
Well, the first episode was actually, it was pretty daunting when we started out, and I think it's always true in these cases. You just start. The saying is walking makes the path. I mean, that's, you start taking one step ahead of another, and you do that informed by all of the information that you have from the period and from the people, the characters in the story, and you just start making those choices as you go. And the first episode we had Africa. We had to show Penang, Malaysia. We had a destroyer. We had San Francisco. We had Phoenix, Arizona. All of those things we shot in Vancouver, Canada, wow. And with some photography in San Francisco. But we had to create all those environments, and that was challenging, and it was a lot of fun too. It's that eased up a little bit as we got into the later episodes, but there are always challenges. I mean, I say to people, these things are always difficult in their own special way. But because of, as you say, it's a huge undertaking. And you just do, you know, one day at a time, one step at a time, one set at a time, and keep moving forward. I often find that when I'm finished with a project like this, I'll go to a screening or the premiere of the show, and I sit there and think, wow, how did we do that? So that's kind of the experience of it, and that's the exciting part, actually, is to meet that challenge.
And it's pretty indicative of the scale and scope of television these days that a project like this would take you to all those different locations and be that daunting of a challenge. You've worked in both film and television. Is there much difference between the two?
I don't think there's so much difference today. I mean, I think the audience expects the same level of detail that in the past may have been thought of as film, but I think that the expectation is there for the same levels of care and detail and storytelling and all of that in television today.
Like we said, you were reunited with Gus Van Sant and Dustin Lance Black, who direct. Gus Van Sant does the beginning, Dustin Lance Black does the end. In between that, you're also working with Dee Reese and Thomas Schlamme. What did each of those directors give you that helped with your work?
Well, I think that's one of the things I love about my work, is that it changes with every director and every project, because it's a very collaborative process. And each person, the director, of course, but also the director of photography, everybody, the writer, the producers, everybody brings their own approach to the project to the table, and you sort of work through that, and it becomes very much a team effort, and it's always different. And every director brings a slightly different point of view, and a different sort of read of the script. You know, the script is not just this static element. It also is interpreted through the director and through everybody that actually creates the project. So that's kind of the exciting thing I think about my work. One of the things I enjoy is that it's never the same twice.
And can you talk a little bit about working with your team of art directors and set decorators and prop people, working as a unit to undertake this massive project?
Well, it's really all about communication, and we start putting things on the wall, research. We start with drawings. We make sure that everybody is seeing everything, and that the idea that we're going for is communicated to everyone on the team. In this particular case, we had an art department in Canada and an art department in San Francisco, and there was a certain amount of just communication between those two teams in two different countries that was required. And it's really, I would say, as much as anything, about that communication.
You mentioned living through a lot of these periods. I wonder, do you bring personal experiences or memories to your work when you're designing sets, in addition to research?
Well, I think everything. I mean, I think it's that way with everybody who approaches this work. I mean, actors certainly do that. I mean, they sort of go deep into their personal lives and so on and so forth. But I think we all do. I mean, it's about finding something in the script that we can convey to an audience that's understandable. And again, as Carol said, we were very careful in this, and I think Lance has made that point several times, very careful to get this right and to tell the truth in this case. And sometimes that's rooted in fact, and I think that was very much the case with When We Rise. I think there was language that Lance used in the scripts that was actually used at the time in certain situations that these people that the story is about remember. And but there's also this connection that I think everybody makes with their own stories and how that relates to this.
Well, as people continue to discover it on demand or streaming or home video eventually, what do you hope people take away from the series?
Well, I think an understanding of how we got where we are today and how much farther we have to go. I think there's still a ways to go. And that's what I think we've sort of hoped to bring to people, is the sort of a kind of understanding of the lives of the people in the story, and as sort of examples of this movement and people that the audience might know in their own personal lives.
You've won 4 Emmys throughout your career for your work on Boardwalk Empire. What has that kind of recognition meant for you in your career?
Well, it feels very good at my age. I won my first Emmy for work that I did when I was 60 years old, and then I won the 4 you mentioned. I won one every year after that. It was Boardwalk was a unique opportunity, really. I mean, shows like that don't come along too often, and I was fortunate enough to be able to design that show for 4 years. I think it feels good to be recognized, and it kind of gets you out there a little bit more, and that's not bad. And I have no intention of stopping anytime soon.
Well, I hope not. Bill Groom, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work on When We Rise.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure talking with you.